Okay, so this is the stabilizer, and it's kind of a complicated piece to fold, but I've cut it out, and you can see I'm folding it along all these places. They've been scored, and so that little tab gets folded, but then there's a separate piece that folds that forms the actual edge, and then that other piece will fold over in here. I'm just testing it to see how it's going to go together with the ends. Looks pretty good. And then a piece of my little internal balsa piece will go inside. So this internal balsa piece was just sanded, so I'm pointing out that I sanded the edges to sort of feather them a little bit so that it wouldn't look like such a blocked piece in there. At least that was the idea. And then this piece just gets put in there and butted up against the hinge line. And then that other piece that I was playing around folding, so I fold that piece over, that tab, and that's going to form the place where when I fold the top flap over, that'll form a place for it to glue down, and it'll work just great. Now this piece needs to be glued, and just use a little white glue and glue it in place, and make sure it works. And once that gets glued in there, see I had a little problem with my glue there getting stuck in the closed position. Put a little glue down, put it on the very edge, and also put it on, say, one side, and that way you'll have a place to attach it to the paper, attach it to the tailpiece. And I'll just sort of tap that down and put the piece of paper up against the flat side. I'm using the table to sort of make sure it's flat and square. And then I'm going to fold that tab over. And when that's done, everything will be ready to fold over that back side, the opposite side, right onto that tab. So put a little glue under there to make sure it sticks. And I put on a huge blob of glue here actually, so I have to sort of tap it down a little bit. But I fold that tab over, and then I go ahead and put the other half down. And then you just make sure it's clean and nice, and make sure the edges look good. And this takes a little bit of time to make sure it turns out. You just squeeze things, make sure the edge, sometimes the edges get too thin and they look really wiry and stupid. But if you're just careful, it tends to work. Flatten the hinge line down using the table again, going back and forth, just to make dang sure everything is flat and straight, because your elevators are going to go on there and you want it to look good. But that's the basic stabilizer done. Now I went through and I used some sandpaper, sanding stick, and sanded the edges. I also coated them with a little bit of red. I even used a sanding block to sand down that edge again flat, and then I started test fitting it to the back of the fuselage. And there's some little lines on the bottom there you can see, so it's easy to fit. There's no guesswork. But when I did that, I did notice that I needed to cut a few things, make some adjustments. So I had to cut a little piece of my balsa out there. And then when I put that piece in to test it, you can see that I'm a little proud there. So I took a real sharp razor blade and just cut this off a teeny amount. Not going to make any difference with how the airplane looks. It'll be just fine. It ended up being like, I don't know, 1/16 of an inch or something. So it's very small. It's going to be just, it'll be unnoticeable. Now when I test fit the stabilizer on there, I think you'll see here that it's actually flush. And that's good. That means the rudder will fit just fine too. So that looks pretty wonderful. Making sure it looks good. Those are going to be elevators, and then the balsa inserts will go in there. So I won't show that because it's the same process. It looks really good. Very good, in fact. So then I opened these holes. That's going to be for the control cables. I didn't show how I did that because I thought it would be easy. But that one, on that side right there, oh, I blew that one. The one on the other side, however, was actually really good. That turned out great. So, I also ended up taking a little hunk out there because when I added it to the fuselage, it was actually had a little bit of negative incidence, so the leading edge was down. So I took that out, then I could make it level. So then I just add a little white glue in there, and when I put it on the stabilizer or the fuselage, it was nice and straight. And a lot of this is just making sure that everything is straight and true the way you want to. Make sure it's good. Now, most people, normal people, use a jig or something to make sure it's nice and straight and perpendicular. I tend to use the Mark 1 eyeball, for better or for worse, but it seems to work for me most of the time. And here I'm, for instance, adjusting it's off a little bit, but the fit is actually quite good. So you just spend a little bit of time, take your time, be patient to try to make sure that you get it everything perpendicular and straight and true. I'm making sure when I sight down from the front and the back, the stabilizer isn't leaning to one side or drooping. You want to make sure it looks nice and straight and good. And then once you do that, you're set. I also took the time to open those holes on the fuselage on both sides and also back in the back end for the rudder. For those are going to be for the control cables, which will be coming up pretty soon actually. But it all looks really good. Straight, true start of the tail, so that's wonderful. The rest should just fall into place. Here I'm still taking like a little straight edge and my board and trying to make sure everything is at a right angle. And it looks good. Now the rudder pedals I have canted to one side, so when I do put the rudder on, it's going to have to be turned like that so that it matches what's on the inside. But I'm going to leave that off for now. The next step will be to, I can make the elevators, but then I'm going to start working on the wings. So this thing is looking really, really great.